I want you to imagine something for a second. You're a soldier. You are highly trained, incredibly disciplined, and you are absolutely confident in your skills. You know the sounds of the battlefield, right? You know them like the back of your own hand. But what happens when the very rhythm of combat, the very sound of war itself, changes in an instant, and you find yourself on the wrong side of that change? So, our story starts right here, in the dust and heat of North Africa. We're with a man named Oberleutnant Wilhelm Schmidt. He's a veteran German officer, and right now, he's hunkered down behind a low stone wall, his trusty Karabiner 98K rifle rusting in his hands. He's watching American GIs move across a field, and everything he's been told is that these new opponents, well, they're soft, inexperienced, amateurs. You have to understand this cadence, crack, work the bolt, crack. This was so much more than just a sound. For Schmidt, for the entire German army, this was the sound of being a professional soldier. It was deliberate, it was precise, it was powerful. Every single one of those 5 rounds in his rifle was a testament to superior marksmanship and iron discipline. This was the exact rhythm that had carried them clear across a continent. Because in the next minute, literally the next 60 seconds, everything, and I mean everything, that Wilhelm Schmidt thought he knew about infantry combat was about to become completely, totally obsolete. The first thing that hit him was just the shock of the sound itself. It wasn't the familiar punctuated crack, pause, crack of his own side's rifles. No, this was a continuous, overwhelming wall of noise. A roar. So while Schmidt is managing to get off maybe 3 carefully aimed shots, the American GI on the other side of the field has already ripped through his entire 8-round clip and is reloading. This was the sound of the M1 Garand. Okay, so what was really going on here? This wasn't just 2 pieces of hardware meeting on a battlefield. No, this was a clash of 2 entirely different ways of thinking about war itself. And when you look at them side by side, the differences in philosophy are just stark. The German doctrine, really a holdover from World War I and even earlier, it stressed that every single round had to be carefully placed by a highly trained marksman. It was all about individual precision. But the American doctrine, which was really empowered by this new rifle, focused on something else entirely, overwhelming the enemy with a massive volume of aimed fire. And the key to this whole thing was the Garand's gas-operated semi-automatic action and its absolutely brilliant 8-round end-block clip. Basically, a little metal packet that you slammed into the rifle, loading all 8 rounds in a single motion, making reloads shockingly fast. You know, to put it really simply, the K98K was, without a doubt, one of the finest bolt-action military rifles ever made. It was the absolute perfection of 100 years of firearm technology. But the M1 Garand, well, it didn't really care about perfecting the past. It was way too busy defining the future of warfare. And that future? It was built on a very simple and very brutal foundation, the raw, unforgiving mathematics of firepower. And believe me, the Germans were about to learn that lesson the hard way. Just look at these numbers. They are absolutely staggering. A skilled, professional German soldier, working that bolt as fast as humanly possible, could maybe get off 15 aimed rounds in a minute. His American counterpart with the Garand, he could put 30 to 40 rounds downrange in that same amount of time. That isn't just a small advantage, folks. That is a complete and total tactical mismatch. So let's translate that to a real firefight. In a typical 2-minute engagement, a German rifleman could fire 30 rounds. The American GI? He could fire 80. 80 rounds. Now, stop and imagine the psychological effect of that. Every single time that German soldier peeks his head up to fire one shot, he gets 3 or 4 rounds coming back at him instantly. How do you fight against that? And it's about so much more than just the raw numbers. It's about how those numbers change the fight. With the Garand, you never have to take your eye off the target to work a bolt. Your aim stays true. This lets you lay down continuous, suppressing fire. It enables American squads to use fire and maneuver tactics with absolutely devastating effect. One half of the squad pours on the fire, pinning the enemy down, while the other half advances. You just couldn't do that with a bolt action. And hey, don't just take my word for it. This wasn't some kind of marketing hype. A guy like General George S. Patton, a man who understood the brutal mechanics of violence better than almost anyone, he saw exactly what this weapon meant. He knew the Garand had fundamentally changed the power of the individual soldier, giving one man the firepower that used to require a whole squad. Now, the German high command, they weren't stupid. They saw what was happening, and they recognized the problem almost immediately. But, recognizing a problem and actually solving it in the middle of a world war, well, those are two very, very different things. Their attempts to catch up just felt like they were always a step behind. Their first try, the G41, was basically a failure. It was unreliable, it was overly complex. Then came the G43, which was a much better rifle, a decent design, but by the time it showed up in 1943, America had already produced millions of Garands. And what about the revolutionary STG-44? An incredible weapon for sure, the world's first true assault rifle. But it was a last-ditch effort that came far, far too late to change the final outcome. And the industrial reality behind this scramble is just, well, it's brutal. For every one G43 semi-automatic rifle the Germans managed to make, their factories were still churning out 50 of the now outdated Kar 98K bolt-action rifles. So the vast, overwhelming majority of German soldiers would fight and die carrying the inferior weapon. The bottom line is this: they got caught completely flat-footed. Their entire military doctrine, their whole idea of what an infantryman was, it was all based on a style of warfare that the M1 Garand was making obsolete by the minute. And they just could not pivot their massive industrial machine in time to catch up. But the story, it doesn't just end in 1945. Not at all. The impact of the M1 Garand echoed far beyond the battlefields of World War II. In fact, it's still shaping military hardware to this day. Think about this number for a second. Over 4 million M1 Garands were produced during the war. This wasn't some special weapon for elite troops. This was the standard issue rifle. The United States made a conscious, industrial-scale commitment to equip nearly every single soldier with this decisive technological advantage. So the Garand's legacy is just profound. First, it proved that a reliable, powerful semi-automatic rifle wasn't just possible, it was absolutely essential for the average soldier. Second, it set a brand new global standard for infantry firepower. And third, every major assault rifle that came after it, I'm talking the AK-47, the M16, you name it, it owes its very existence to the principle that the Garand established. We can actually give this phenomenon a name. Let's call it the M1 Garand effect. It's that critical moment in time when a superior technology doesn't just give you a slight edge, it completely rewrites the rules of the game. It's the moment your enemy's courage, their training, their entire tradition suddenly becomes tragically insufficient. And this brings us right back to where we started, with Oberleutnant Schmidt crouching behind that wall. Because for the individual German soldier who had been trained from day one to believe in his own inherent superiority, this was a devastating psychological blow. The Garand didn't just outshoot them, it shattered a core belief system. Which, of course, leaves us with one final question that's just as relevant today as it was back in 1942, when a deeply held conviction, and it doesn't matter if it's on the battlefield, in a boardroom, or just in our own personal lives, when that belief collides with a disruptive, undeniable new reality, which one is forced to give way? Well, the story of the M1 Garand gives us a pretty clear, and a very loud, answer.